Of you who are coming in, we're just going to there's more people joining us as we go, so we're going to just kind of hang fire for a couple of minutes before we get started. I'll just wait for the number to stabilize, which it seems to be. And Shifa is saying hello to everyone. So just to be sure, as panelists, can you guys see the chat as well? Yeah, if you needed to. Okay, great. Okay, so let us get started because we're really excited about tonight. I know there's maybe some of you new to us because of the illustrious group of people I'm looking at in front of me here. So my name is David Alexander. I'm the director of the Space Institute at Rice University in Houston, Texas. And this is what we call the Houston Spaceport Frontier Lecture Series. We've been running it since about January of 2012. And in the last several years, we've been supported in this effort by the Houston Airport Systems, who manage the Houston Spaceport down at Ellington Field. And if Arturo, I'll need to check later, but Arturo Machuca is the general manager there. He's a good friend to us here at Rice. And so I'd like to thank Arturo. A little bit of housekeeping before we move into the procedures for everyone. Again, thank you all for being here. This is the last Space Frontiers lecture of the semester, or actually the 2020-21 academic year. As you all know, it's been a rather interesting year. Hopefully we'll go back to in-person or maybe some hybrid model when we come back in the fall. What was the other thing I was going to say? I wanted to point out that today is a very special day because we had the first ever native Houstonian become commander of the International Space Station, Shannon Walker. Born and raised in Houston, and got all three of her degrees from Rice University, so we're very proud of Shannon. And in fact, she was one of our participants of the downlink from the space station that we did with young people in schools in Scotland, Houston, and Ecuador just last week. So Shannon's a great friend as well to Rice. And as we're talking about friends, sorry, I forgot. I'm so excited about tonight that I forgot about the logistics. For those of you who've been before, you know what I'm about to say. For those of you who are new, what we're going to do is try and have a really good Q&A after the initial presentations. And what I'd like you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is put your questions in the Q&A button, not under the chat, because then I have to look in too many places and I may miss you. So please put your questions in the Q&A. And I will unmute you and allow you to ask the question yourself, unless you specifically ask me not to. And that way we can have a little bit of a conversation going. So you're all muted so that we don't have any problems there. The panelists, maybe you could keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, just in case. And so with that, I'm really, really excited. We added someone to the program, and I'm really excited. We've got a lot of good people here. We have recently been working with the Canadian government. Actually, I can't take credit for this. It was the consulate in Dallas that started this, and I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon because it's such a good idea. We signed a memorandum of understanding with the Canadian government through the consulate in Dallas under the auspices of the person I'm about to introduce. And we're really excited about how we can use that means to work with our colleagues in Canada, particularly in space, and try and make some connections in the industry side of things and so on. And I should point out for those of you in Canada is that I was just recently asked to chair the Aerospace and Aviation Committee for the Greater Houston Partnership. We had our first meeting in March, and we're having our next meeting in June, and it's on international collaborations and relations. So Rachel, you'll be expecting to hear from me, I hope. And so with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Rachel McCormick, who is the Consul General of Canada in Dallas, and just actually a wonderful person, really, really keen on space. And it's just been a great pleasure to at least virtually get to know Rachel over the last few months. So Rachel, thank you for joining us tonight. It's a great honor to have you, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. And I'm so excited that Canada is a prominent fixture as you wrap up your Spaceport Lecture Series. And we too are really excited about the Memorandum of Understanding for cooperation between the Government of Canada and your organization. I think it's just a really great example of how we can build connections, not just between scientists, but also between industry, policymakers, and decision makers. And we know how important Houston is to the space ecosystem. And today we get a chance to hear from our leadership in Canada about the exciting, innovative ecosystem in this aerospace sector that's happening in Canada. So it's really my pleasure to introduce my colleagues from the Canadian Space Agency. We have the president of CSA, Lisa Campbell, who is joined by her colleagues, Marie-Claude Gerard, who's the Director General for Space Science Technology, as well as Jill Smith, who is the Counselor for Space Affairs at our Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., where I spent 5 years before coming down here as Canada's Chief Diplomat for the South Central United States. Lisa Campbell came to the Space Agency from her role as Assistant Deputy Minister at Veterans Affairs Canada, where she really supported the well-being of veterans and their families and promoting the recognition of those in Canada who have served. Previously, she was Assistant Deputy Minister for Defence and Marine Procurement, leading procurement of Canada's military and marine equipment, and she also worked at Canada's Competition Authority. She has also enforced things like civil and criminal laws for truth in advertising, and she's an alma mater from McGill University, as well as Dalhousie Law School. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa for a great conversation, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Thank you, Dr. Alexander and the Rice Space Institute for inviting us. We're delighted for the opportunity to talk about the Canadian Space Program and with the Rice University community and other stakeholders who joined us. Thank you also to the Dallas Consulate General and to you particularly, Rachel McCormick and your team, Dina and Ethan. We really appreciate the support you've provided in coordinating tonight's event and also your excellent efforts promoting Canada-US collaboration. It's a pleasure to be here. So the Canadian Space Program began nearly 60 years ago. The United States launched Canada's first satellite, the Alouette, studying space weather and the ionosphere. And in 1969, NASA invited Canada's government to join the shuttle program. And the result was the first Canadarm. Last November, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. Canada is one of 5 partners on the International Space Station, and Canadarm2 was used on every single assembly mission, and we're finding new uses for it as it goes on. Today, some of the unexpected roles for Canadarm2 have included capturing cargo vehicles, doing experiments, helping with spare parts. And now we're heading into a new chapter in space exploration history, a return to the moon and eventually to Mars. So many of you, if you're here, you've heard about the Lunar Gateway. Canada is contributing Canadarm3, an artificial intelligence-enabled robotic system comprised of robotic manipulators, interfaces, specialized tools, and importantly, operation of all of those systems. So it will help care for the gateway when people aren't there. It's also going to grow key industrial capabilities in Canada's space sector. Our participation in the Lunar Gateway is also securing flight opportunities for Canadian Space Agency astronauts. 2 lunar missions for Canadian astronauts in the Artemis program. On Artemis 2, the first crewed mission, which is planned to launch in 2023 to fly around the moon, and it'll include a Canadian Space Agency astronaut. It'll make Canada the 2nd country to have an astronaut fly around the moon. Our astronauts are based in Houston and train at NASA's Johnson Space Center. So as we look at future deep space missions, some of the principles that we're thinking about in Canada are advancing innovative technologies in areas of strength, solving challenges here on Earth, and really allowing small and medium-sized companies to innovate and collaborate across sectors. To help with that, we've got a program called the Lunar Exploration Accelerator program. It's got a total budget of $150 million over 5 years, and its goal is to support technology development, in-space demonstration, and science missions. It brings together universities, companies, and research institutions to help develop and demonstrate science instruments and lunar technologies in fields that include artificial intelligence, robotics, and health. We're also very interested in health, and sending humans to more distant destinations like the Moon and Mars involves bigger challenges than traveling to the International Space Station. Crews are going to need more independence, more autonomy, and the health and well-being of space crews is a priority area for Canada and every country that goes to space. The challenges of healthcare in space are similar to the challenges for medically isolated populations. So through a program called Health Beyond, we connect Canadian health and space experts to find solutions to healthcare challenges that are common to astronauts on deep space missions, but also can help us with Canadians living in remote or extreme environments. Examples of this include miniaturized and portable medical devices, innovative sensor technologies, and AI-enabled virtual healthcare solutions. All of this, of course, and we're seeing this particularly this year with everything that we're going through, this will also enable access to clinical, lab, and imaging services in remote communities. Anything that we can do to lower the cost of medical transportation and reducing time away from home for residents of these communities is helpful also for space exploration. We're also working very closely with companies, innovators, and NASA on food. So food and ensuring nutritious, healthy access to food in remote communities is something that's also helpful in space. We're looking at how to efficiently grow food in harsh environments on Earth and improve the accessibility of fresh food across Canada, including remote northern communities. The Norvik Project, which means the growing place in Inuktitut, is a community-led hydroponic food production system in Johaven, Nunavut. It's a community about 250 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. Winters there are long. They're cold and windy with temperatures dipping to -40. And as in many northern communities, high quality, fresh, affordable produce may not always be available. Inuit knowledge makes this project unique and adapted to the needs of the community. Related to this, we're doing a deep space food challenge with NASA. And the point of this is to develop new technologies to produce food for future space missions while expanding opportunities for food production on Earth. We're calling all innovators to submit a design concept for their food production technology by July 30th, 2021. Our focus for the coming year, we're going to look at the James Webb Space Telescope. It's planned to be launched in October of this year, and it's the most powerful and complex space observatory that's ever existed. Canada is a major partner. We're providing the fine guidance sensor for the telescope to point in space, as well as a near-infrared imager and spectrograph. Our space scientists are part of the cadre of global leaders in astronomy, planetary exploration, life sciences research, and also environmental sciences. We're also very focused on space-based Earth observation and artificial intelligence. All of this started with the Alouette satellite that I mentioned 60 years ago. And since then, we've continued investing in state-of-the-art satellites. The most recent satellite family of RadarSat-1 launched in 1995, then RadarSat-2 in 2007, and the RadarSat Constellation mission in 2019. Images of the Earth's surface that show potential threats and contribute to maritime surveillance, to disaster management, and ecosystem monitoring are all very helpful to a number of federal agencies and even international partners. Canada's vast land means that we need to observe the Earth from space because it helps our federal and also our provincial and municipal governments. We can monitor and protect the environment in the north, manage natural resources, and ensure the safety and security of our population. From space, we can see a big picture of our land, waters, and atmosphere and how they interact and change over time. So this unique perspective of Earth is really critical for us to help monitor, understand, and protect our planet. We're trying to become an even more progressive world leader in observing the Earth, and every country is really interested in this. You can see it growing around the world with synthetic aperture radar so that we can see through darkness and all weather. We're using AI to advance machine learning, big data analytics, and data integration techniques to revolutionize the field of Earth observation. Companies have told us that access to easy-to-use Earth observation data helps them turn information to support a wide range of applications, from disaster management to precision agriculture. So we're seeing more and more that satellites help drive innovation and growth in a digital economy. And as technologies advance and the demand for this Earth observation data increases, so should our ability to acquire and use the data to support science excellence, innovation, and economic growth. We're very optimistic about the future. The global space economy, many analysts predict that it'll grow from just under 400 billion in space GDP last year to 1.4 trillion by the end of this decade. Many others are forecasting a multi-trillion-dollar space economy by the 2040s. So space is more and more accessible, and it really is the jobs of tomorrow. So our message to US companies is keep Canada in mind. We've got 60 years of success stories in space. We're a reliable, trusted partner. We believe in space commercialization. In fact, Axiom will be flying a Canadian as part of its first private astronaut crew scheduled for January 2022. The flight is the first in a series planned by the company, which seeks to later add commercial modules to the ISS as a precursor to a standalone space station. I'll give you an example of some of the great Canadian companies who are ready to collaborate in the international market. They've got niche expertise, depth of expertise, and here's an example. MDA in robotics and synthetic aperture radar, or Honeywell with LiDARs. Innovative companies like Félix and Paul based here in Montreal. They're using the first 360 camera in space, and they've created the largest production ever filmed in space. It's called Space Explorers, the ISS Experience. It's an immersive series that really makes you feel like you're on missions in space and sitting in the International Space Station talking to an astronaut. Our companies have future-looking and global priorities, such as environment and climate change. A company called GHGSat detects and measures methane emissions from point sources 100 times smaller than any comparable system with a resolution that's 100 times higher. Kepler Communications, they've expanded their constellation a month ago, and this milestone turns the company into the operator of the largest satellite fleet in Canada. So as mentioned earlier, Canada's been working in collaboration with the United States for many years to enable these remarkable and inspiring space missions. For the next part of our discussion tonight, I'd like to invite my colleague Jill Smith to share some thoughts about the historical partnership Canada and the US have built together. Jill, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here this evening with you. I'll start by saying again that Canada and the United States have built one of the closest relationships between any two countries in the world. Last February, our governments have released a roadmap for renewed Canada-US partnership, which articulates a mutual commitment to revitalize and expand our historic alliance and friendship to, and I quote, to overcome the daunting challenges of today and realize the full potential of the relationship into the future. With the space program, we can contribute to current common national priorities. And I wish to highlight a couple of those priorities, but they're not the only one. Of course, a top priority shared by both our countries is sustainable and inclusive economic recovery from COVID-19. Space contributes to generating highly skilled jobs and supporting innovation. And Marie-Claude will say a few words on this topic in just a few minutes. Another priority for both governments is at the highest level is fight against climate change. Space plays a key role in this endeavor, given that over half of the essential climate variables can only be effectively measured from space. In addition to GHGSat, which Lisa mentioned just a few minutes ago, I wanted to give another example of how we collaborate with the US. And there's that mission called Surface Water Ocean Topography Mission, or the SWOT mission. So Canada has contributed technology to this US-France-led mission that will, for the first time ever, do a global survey of the Earth's surface water. So keep an eye out for the launch in early 2022 and for the amazing science that will inform us on the water cycle around the Earth. Canada-US collaboration works well and productively for many reasons, and it's beyond having similar priorities, goals, and ambitions. The science and the industrial expertise we bring to complex missions are complementary to one another. It allows us to reduce costs, to mitigate risks, on state-of-the-art space missions, and our collaboration continues to grow. Both the US National Space Policy and Canada's space strategy call for increased international collaboration. Not only we have a strong foundation to collaborate on current priorities, but there's also renewed momentum to continue along our successful historical path through the renewed Treaty on Canada-US Space Cooperation Framework Agreement. And we recently signed the Lunar Gateway Agreement and the Artemis Accords led by the US, on which I'd like to say a few words. So with increased number of players conducting missions and operations around and on the moon, it's critical to establish a common set of principles to govern responsible exploration and use of outer space. So last fall, we signed the Artemis Accords along with 7 other nations. And there are now a total of 10 nations who have signed the accords. The Artemis Accords described a shared vision for principles grounded in the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. The accords are a great example of how we enable change in the global space sector. New business models and new players from non-traditional sectors are now joining spacefaring nations in the quest to explore space. And to ensure we address these changes correctly, the Canadian Space Agency has recently consulted Canadians on emerging space activities. And the goal was to determine how to best implement the principle of the Artemis Accords in a way to position Canadian industry to leverage new opportunities while ensuring that we continue to meet our international obligations under the Outer Space Treaty. So we're actively making sure that the rules of engagements for space are good for everyone. Our adhesion to the Artemis Accords illustrate Canada's commitment to ensuring safe, transparent, and sustainable space exploration in a way that facilitates science and commercial space activities. Our countries collaborate on many fronts and many levels, and we have various collaboration mechanisms in place to enable those partnerships. And we are always looking to improve our way of doing business. For example, over the past years, we hosted industry days with companies such as Virgin Galactic and Lockheed Martin. These are opportunities and forums to further connect Canadians and US space industries. And with all the great work that's going on in Houston, we would be delighted to host similar forum for companies and organizations. Our industry relations team and the Canadian Trade Commissioner Services team in Texas are able to put such programs together. So whether it's industry or academia related, just let us know and we'll do our very best to make it happen. And on that, I wish to highlight again the great work that was done between the Rice Space Institute and the Consulate General of Canada in Dallas, who has signed that Memorandum of Understanding in November to collaborate on science and technology related to space. So we believe that this agreement will facilitate Canada's participation in an already strong connection between Rice, NASA, and its international partners and commercial space industry as well, including collaboration in areas such as robotics, space, life sciences, artificial intelligence, space transportation, or communications as well. And on this note, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Marie-Claude, whose team is working very closely with Canadian industry and academia, supporting the development of innovating space technologies and applications. So over to you, Marie-Claude.
Thank you very much, Jill. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with you. Well, I will always like to be at the Rice University to sing the Rice Fight song with you, but maybe another time. As Jill mentioned, I'm really honored to be here. And as Director General of Space Science and Technology, I'm also responsible for a skills development program focused on helping undergraduate students transition into the workforce. This has not been an easy year for our space industry. Helping support Canada's space sector during this pandemic has been my priority. We doubled short-term financial investment in our science and technology programs, an increase of 25 million Canadian over existing plans pre-pandemic, and a total investment of 52 million over the next 2 years for companies and universities. Our space sector, made up of mainly small and medium-sized business, is quite nimble and has shown amazing resilience. Canada's space sector includes 200 space-related firms and world-leading Canadian university and research centers that host and generate top talent in many disciplines. The Canadian space sector employs close to 10,000 people, of whom 61% are STEM-related employees, and indirectly supports 11,000 additional jobs in the wider economy. As Lisa said, space is fast-growing global market. In the last few years, CSA has been hard at work to secure new opportunities for Canadian organizations in international markets. We have done this through agency-to-agency agreement, and the renewal of our agreement with the United States is a strong example of Canadian economic diplomacy. None of these efforts will be successful if we don't also invest in our workforce. Let me talk about that. I would like to talk about the Space Capacity Development Program now. It takes more than astronauts to get to space. Behind every space mission, there are computer programmers, scientists, mathematicians, physicists, and engineers. These are the job of the future. Canada's innovation economy depends on a highly skilled technical workforce, and our CSA Space Capacity Development Program support those activities, starting from pre-mission research and development to timely flight demonstration, while developing the space workforce of tomorrow with the aim of positioning the Canadian space sector to seize global opportunities. And we are doing that with funding for internships and conferences, funding science at the university level, and also we encourage collaboration between university, students, and industry. We work with partners, NASA, the European Space Agency, JAXA, and others, because we want to learn from each other and open up opportunities for students to gain diverse experience. Talking about Lunar Gateway, there's a great opportunity. There's a new working group on education co-led by ESA, NASA, and CSA and JAXA are part of this committee. And together we are building an education program while developing the Gateway program so that both are perfectly integrated. It's cool. And finally, I would like to talk about diversity. I would like to talk to you about the importance of a diverse and inclusive workforce. CSA, just like NASA and more partners around the world, is focused on creating an inclusive and diverse space workforce in Canada. As part of that vision, the CSA is proud to be part of a Government of Canada pilot program designed to address systemic barriers. More must be done, and this is a priority. The Canadian Space Agency's vision is a future that is barrier-free. Over to you now, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Jill and Marie-Claude. David, what have we got for questions? Questions or comments? Or Rachel, or anyone, if anyone would like to ask us some questions, we're delighted to answer.
I'm sorry, I was talking while muted.
Was it brilliant, David? Was it brilliant? Share.
So if you wouldn't mind answering all those questions I just asked. No, thank you very much. You know, again, this is why I was excited. I mean, Canada is obviously, as you've mentioned, it's been a great partner to the US, but it's more than that. It's actually helped grow what we have as a space program that's the benefit to the world over. So it's just great to hear all of this and the continuing work. And I think your presentations, for all of you listening, before you came on, I was boasting about how our audience was knowledgeable and not shy. So please don't prove me wrong and put your questions. There is one I'll come to in a second. Please put your questions in the Q&A. And I think some of the questions I had, you've sort of answered them. And so I'm going to, once we've given our audience an opportunity, I'm going to ask them again, but I'm going to use the word elaborate. So at least I can pretend that they were brand new questions. So, but I think, let me see. So as I said, what I'd like to do is is allow our questioners to speak. And so Shifa, I'm looking at your name, and I hope you're not, I hope you're willing to, I need to go here and find you in the list. And please ask your question. If you prefer not to, I'm happy to do so for you, but let me find you. Here you are. We have quite an audience tonight, and I'm allowing you to talk, Shifa. So the microphone is yours if you'd like to ask the panel your question.
Hello, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask. I wanted to ask if the Food Challenger Project is open for grade 8 students.
Oh, that's a great question. Hi, Shifa, nice to meet you. So, yeah, and I'm so glad that you're interested in this. So I will be able to answer you in 1 second. It's a challenge to companies. Essentially, we're looking for innovative technologies, but you know, lots of people can form companies. We have a number of programs that are directed specifically at students. We try and engage them in a junior astronaut program that we have. And I'll turn to my colleague Marie-Claude in a moment. But the Food Challenge, our STEM programs will have youth food challenges in them, but the Deep Space Food Challenge, and I invite you to look it up on our website or on NASA's website, is really to try and get food production technologies for space, but also for harsh Earth environments, either places where it's difficult to grow food or because urban infrastructure has been disrupted and you need to distribute nutritious, healthy food. And the point of it is to make it good and fun to eat. This is one of the things as we look at exploring space even further, how do you keep humans healthy? How do you have them have nutritious food that they want to eat, that's good for their bodies, and how can it sustain over time? So I'll turn over to Marie-Claude to answer. Marie-Claude, est-ce que tu voulais élaborer là-dessus? Do you want to add anything on that?
Yes, if I may. Also, there's the Deep Space Food Challenge, which is a collaboration with NASA, whereby academia and industry take part in a competition to develop new technological ways of producing food for future space mission while expanding opportunities for food production on Earth. That's another opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much.
So Shifa, before you go, let me ask you a question.
I was just going to add one more thing, David.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. So please, no, please.
Yep, because Shifa, please, we need your ideas. We need your brilliance. And in Canada, we've got an organization called Let's Talk Science. Look them up. Bonnie Schmidt, if I remember correctly, is the head of it. And they work with something called Tomato Sphere. And students worked on tomato seeds that flew to space. So you know about that. Oh, that's great.
Yes, I've actually been working on it.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I think you just answered my question, Shiva. I was going to say, if when you're in space in the future, what would you want to eat? Get those smart people working on it now. What would you like to eat while you're as an astronaut?
That's a difficult question. I'd love to eat anything.
Okay, good. I did give a talk about deep fried Mars bars in space a few months ago in Scotland. It did not go down. It would not win the challenge. Let me just say that. Okay, so thank you, Shifa, for your question. That was great. Let me go. We have a couple more coming in. Imad, so I think this is maybe a question for everyone on the panel. So Imad, let me again, just so that we can hear your voice, let me, sorry, I keep having to hit all these different buttons on the one screen, but let me give you the mic, Imad, and you are right here. There you go. You're now free to talk.
Thank you. I just want to appreciate you giving me the mic. So the question is, how will we be able to basically list our company open for collaborations with US entities or schools, or if there's a platform that will be able to do some postings in order to acquire some talent or whoever's interested in joining this, I guess, entire journey for years to come. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Imad. So that's why we're here tonight, is to point out all of the collaboration opportunities between Canada and the United States. And those partnerships are happening, but we want to grow them. because there's great areas of expertise. And as we all know, scientific transfer of information, technology transfers, it makes everyone stronger, especially when you're dealing with something like space. So we have a section on our website that lists all of the opportunities that are open for companies. So we regularly post those, and you've heard me talk about some of them. And it is a good idea to check it often to see, you know, what jobs we have open, what funding, what connections we're making with academic institutions. But as my colleague Jill Smith mentioned, and I'll turn to Jill in a moment, we also work hard to do industry days, stakeholder days, where we bring together academics, researchers, companies who are interested in working on something and help them make those connections. Jill, over to you. And I know Jill was having some internet issues. So are you okay, Jill, to answer this one?
Seems to be good now.
Excellent, over to you.
Yes, so for Canadian companies, we also have mailing lists. I think you can go through the website as well and make sure that if we have those events, for example, industry days, those are sent through our mailing list to companies. And I would also like to highlight the work of trade commissioners throughout the US. We have trade commissioners based, I think 18 regions, and Rachel, I may be mistaken here, but I think that's it. So those teams and those services are really well equipped as well to help you make those connections, to collaborate. So that's what I had to add on that. I don't know, Rachel, if you wanted to add something.
Yep, and Rachel just mentioned in the chat as well. Please reach out to them. Rachel, over to you.
No, you know, I would just say we work with the Rice Alliance, we work with lots of other groups to create B2B matchmaking processes. And I've put a link in the chat so that you can contact our office here in Dallas. And we also have a small office in Houston. So you can contact us, and there are a lot of programs through the Trade Commissioner Service that we can point you to. But the first step is, I guess, to get in touch with us. And I've put that link in the chat box so you can follow up. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think one of our aims with the memorandum is to sort of start looking for those connections between the companies. We've already had some really interesting conversations with some Canadian companies around Mars exploration and things like that. So there's a lot of connections to be made. I mean, I think that's the key thing. This is such a big problem going into space. That we need all the smart people we can get, future, Shifa, and current, and I think these kind of activities that Rachel and Jill and Lisa are talking about really help move that forward. So our next question is from someone who's about to graduate from our professional master's program in space studies, but he's also works at NASA Johnson Space Center. So Colin, I'm going to give you the mic so that you can ask your question. Just bear with me a second. I imagine I'm going to log myself off by pressing all these buttons, but here you go, Colin, the floor's yours.
All right, thank you, Dr. Alexander, and thanks for the rest of the panelists coming to present tonight. I do want to mention that I have had the opportunity to work with a bunch of Canadian flight controllers and engineers in my current work, and it has been a wonderful working with them, and we do have a great collaborative relationship in terms of ISS operations, which is what I work on. So my question relates to something that was brought up, I don't recall who, related to the Artemis Accords and the Outer Space Treaty. Someone mentioned that Canada signed on to the Artemis Accords recently, and that made me wonder what y'all's thoughts are in relationship to updates to the Outer Space Treaty. It was written a long time ago, relatively speaking, and there's been a lot of changes since then, really in respect to the commercial space sector. So I'd like to get your thoughts on potential updates there.
Colin, nice to meet you virtually, and great to hear that you've got good working relationships with Canadian counterparts. It's so wonderful when we hear those stories. Deep friendships are made over time as people who are really dedicated work in the space sector and trust and rely on one another. Yeah, this is an excellent question, and I'm seeing now some of the other related questions in the chat, so I'll try and address some of them. More than ever, there's a need for international norms and rules and the right incentives for responsible behavior in space. Our core mission at the Canadian Space Agency is to promote the peaceful use and sustainable exploration of space for the benefit of people on Earth, but also space. And as it becomes more crowded and as costs decrease and there are more and more commercial players and more states, you know, nations that weren't spacefaring nations are becoming involved. That's a good thing, but you need some predictability in the rules and you need responsible behavior. Some other people have talked about space debris. That's a real issue. A lot of astronomers are worried about, you know, can we see stars anymore because it's becoming crowded and cluttered, and how do you incentivize companies to behave responsibly to clean up after themselves? So updated norms and rules that make us ready for what's coming is urgent. In Canada, that's part of the reason, you know, we sign on to accords like the Artemis Accord, and why we're consulting Canadians, as Jill mentioned. We want their input, and we're encouraging other countries to become involved as well. And we're also looking at our own domestic laws and regulations. We want to be an easy partner for the world when it comes to space sector exploration and use of space resources. So we need to modernize our existing legal and policy framework to make sure that it's good for Canadian companies and to invite the world to come and do business with us. So there's an economic angle, but also an international, environmental, and geospatial, right? Countries, nation states, we're traditionally thinking of, you know, land, sea, and air, but now all of those dynamics are now manifesting in space. And one would hope that it brings countries together, that they bring their best talent and promote peace and sustainable use and exploration of space. It's what we all need. These are fragile environments. There's so much that we don't know. And we've seen, you know, in the last 60 years, the tremendous benefits that can come when countries work together. So we're active participants in existing international fora. You know, the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. I've got colleagues who are there now. I'll be there next week. So we're active participants in all of the international fora, both bilaterally and multilaterally, because it is important to have those international norms and incentives for countries and companies. Someone else asked if we work and cooperate with space agencies other than NASA, and the answer is a resounding yes. We work with JAXA, with the European Space Agency. We have many arrangements and agreements with countries around the world. And we also try and help with capacity building. For those countries that want to become involved in space exploration, we try and help them. We were just speaking a little while ago with Australia. It has a much newer space agency. And it's really interesting because they can look around the world and pick some of the best practices and modernize their approaches. So we're always interested in partnering with nations who want to become involved in space exploration. Marie-Claude or Jill, would you like to add to anything that I've said, or have I missed anything? Colin, I hope that answers your great question.
Yeah, Lisa, I appreciate you answering that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm looking at the questions, Lisa, and I think you're making my job really easy because you did answer a couple of them there. So Nenpan, I hope you got a good answer. I think Lisa was mentioned a number of different countries that Canada's working with, as well as the UN and so on. So if for some reason you feel that you've got a sort of more pointed question to ask, just please add it as another question and we'll get to it. But I think it's been answered. And I'd normally like to go to Vincent because he answered the conquest question. You need to know Vincent, he has got quite a science fiction collection, so I think he's worried about us being taken over by aliens. But Vincent, I think you were partly, your question was partly addressed, but let me give you a few seconds to add to it if you would like. Vincent has worked with us a lot on cross-pollination of technologies between energy and space industries. So Vincent, I'm going to give you the mic for a couple of seconds. You're on.
Thanks, David. Bonjour, mesdames du Canada. Lisa, you partially answered my question, but you didn't. It's all about intention to try to regulate the conquest of space. But how much power will you be able to levy on the Elon Musk of the world that say, if I get there first, it's mine?
Hi, Vincent. Nice to meet you. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Were you going to add more?
Yeah, no, it's, and yeah, and are the states or the UN, are they going to have you know, forceful or binding over individual companies? I mean, is that the intent? A bit like Antarctica.
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, the real strength, and I mentioned this earlier, comes from nations coming together and thinking about the public good. But, you know, it's been interesting. You've seen the deliberate shift towards commercialization of some parts of space exploration, and the costs are coming down, and that's a good thing. It makes it more accessible. But along with that comes a need for the right incentives for responsible behavior. So what are the right incentives to make sure that there isn't space debris, that people behave responsibly when they're in space, that they behave collaboratively, that they share science, that they don't desecrate, you know, delicate environments. I mean, we've got to be really careful that we don't disrupt something that it can't be corrected afterwards. So we're working very hard to be present in international fora, to press for norms and rules of engagement. And you make a great point, Vincent. A lot of the things that we're heading into, there is no precedent for this. We can sometimes use some of these examples on Earth, but much of it is brand new. So working with what we know about international laws and responsible behavior, how can we advance that? And I think this was a question asked by Colin earlier. I mean, some of the existing instruments that are out there were set up decades ago and couldn't even conceive of some of the things that we're seeing now. There's an urgency to all of this because it is moving very rapidly, which is why we're investing resources. We've got a policy team who work very hard on this. We're talking about it as I am tonight. We're present at international conferences, and we've got a team dedicated to this work because we really believe that multilateral engagement of spacefaring nations will make it better for everyone. Marie-Claude, est-ce que tu voulais ajouter là-dessus? Do you want to add anything, Marie-Claude?
I think, as you mentioned, but what is important is the work that we are doing to develop technology and research. I think that's the only thing that I would like to add on your purpose, Lisa.
Thanks, Marie-Claude. And Vincent and Colin, you know, Jill Smith, our colleague, is there. She's in the United States and building those strong bridges and connections and making the links between nations. So Jill, anything that you wanted to add on that? Jill, I'm not sure you can hear us.
Okay, no, I can hear you. I'm having problems with my computer.
Go ahead.
So thanks, Lisa. I think you covered the answer very well. So I don't have anything to add, except just reemphasize the importance of multilateral discussions on this, and really the importance of building a common set of norms for responsible use and the responsible behaviors in space. So I think that's what we can rely on for now and building on the future for sure. Because we do want to encourage those commercial and innovative companies to go out there and to push the boundaries of space exploration. We want this. But we want to do this responsibly for sure.
Merci.
Can I take chair's privilege and follow on before I go back to the audience and ask, you know, because of the opening of space, the decrease in size of satellites, etc., there's a lot of smaller countries that probably don't even constitute emerging nations when it comes to space. Of course, Canada's very well established, for example, and now we're talking about India and China and being big players. But there's a lot of smaller countries looking to, because they see it as an economic investment for their population and for their next generation and so on. So how do we encourage more of this? Is it through the UN, or has Canada got programs specifically to reach out to certain partners or open to everyone? How do we bring more of those smaller countries into the conversation?
That's an excellent point, David. And some of the other questions that I saw bring this up. I think it's incumbent on people who are interested and excited about space to talk to everyone. You can be ambassadors on why space matters. Why we should spend money on it. I was looking at some recent statistics lately, and most countries spend more money on tobacco and alcohol than they do on space. it's just interesting to think about because, you know, they do seem like big numbers, but if you make it relative in terms of priorities, and then if you look at the return on investment in terms of innovation and spin-off benefits in medicine, in science, in geography, and we need to communicate more to populations and non-space sectors why space matters. Space touches our lives, you know, dozens of times a day, but it's not understood or well known. And that's increasing. If you look at satellites are a great example. Oh, I see someone likes what I just said. That's good. That's good. So please, everyone who's on this call, consider yourselves ambassadors to tell everyone you know about why space is important and touches their lives and why the return on investment is actually phenomenal. It's one of the best investments you can make because, again, high quality jobs, spin-off benefits in other areas, whether it's health, food production, management of natural resources, precision agriculture, you name it. We have so many examples of that. And that, I think, to get back to what Vincent and Colin were raising, will actually help us engage more people in why this matters and drive a consensus. I mentioned, you know, a company that wouldn't have thought of itself as a space company. They do film production here in Montreal, but they've become the first company to do the largest production in space, an immersive 3D experience, making people feel like they're on the space station. It's going to make space accessible, what was previously the domain and is still, you know, of specialized, people have specialized training or who have the wealth to get to space. It's going to make it much more accessible. And we're going to see more and more of that. Non-space sectors that are brought in because of the innovation and the spin-offs. And so the more people who care about space, the easier it'll be for us to insist on responsible rules of conduct.
That's a great point. I actually gave a talk recently where I said, it was a digital conference, and I said, you're all space companies, whether you want to be or not, because we need your technology, right? Anything that you're doing in VR, and anyway, there are a couple of questions. There's a couple of questions that are very, very specific to potentially funding from CSA. Would you like to answer those publicly or privately via responding to the questions, or I can open the mic to the questioners?
Yeah, I think
Sarah Morgan, I think, was the first one, and then I think Shifa has another question.
And maybe
well.
I can help with some of them, and I'll also ask Marie-Claude if she's ready to answer some of them. But fire away, happy to help.
Okay, so Sarah, and sorry, I'm jumping line a second here. Hien, I think the space debris question was answered because Lisa was pretty good at looking down the questions. So again, just maybe send me a chat if you'd like to ask something more specific, and I'll come right back to you. Sarah, I'm going to open the mic for you. Give me 1 second. Let me get there. I'm getting better at this, but I can still make a mistake. Oh, there's two Sarah Morgans. Are you the yellow one or the green one? Sarah, I think maybe you're on twice. I'm going to allow you to talk. Your question about the submissions. Maybe you're the green Sarah. Let me add the green Sarah to allow you to talk. Sarah, are you?
Yes, hi there.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Sorry about that.
I have one of my co-workers who I met at IAC because the Canadian Space Agency sponsored both of us to attend. So,
oh, great.
Thank you so much for the excellent information. Nanolit is a quantum dot lighting technology company, and we've presented to the CSA on lighting for humans. We have a remote community installation at Canadore College in North Bay. And we've also presented to your team on deep space food technology and using our lighting there. We're super excited about the grants that you have upcoming, and you've also introduced us to Lockheed. It's been amazing. So I guess what I wanted to know is, since it's the same technology for both food and people, should we be filing two separate applications, or should we just file an application that addresses both issues?
So I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Marie-Claude if she's got some things to answer. We're trying so hard to make it easy for people to share all of their good ideas and to partner. And so if you've got, solutions that do 3 things, we hope to make it as easy as possible for you. Again, that goes to what I was talking about earlier. So your feedback is super, super helpful to us in the sense that, there's 2 things out there that you might be interested in. So Marie-Claude, est-ce que tu veux ajouter là-dessus?
Yes, I will continue. And hello, Sarah. Nice to have you on board. We were at the IAC at Washington. It was great. I think here we're talking about processes, and means that we have specific call for, let's say, for the food. It means that you will have to submit for those specific funding process. And if it's contracting an RFP that it's open, you will have to submit really separately on both. But as Lisa mentioned, we work to make those processes easier, faster, and we hope that it will be helpful for you.
Yeah, and Marie-Claude, and I'll just pick up on that. So as everyone knows, procurement processes in the United States and Canada are pretty similar, but the Deep Space Food Challenge is just that, it's a challenge. Rather than being prescriptive about what we're looking for, we're saying to industry and researchers, tell us what solutions you have out there. How you get to it isn't, it's really your business, but tell us about the solutions, and it's a much shorter time frame. So we're really excited about this and excited to see what it brings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and that's a great hat, Sarah. I like the hat in your picture.
That's at Hadrian's Wall in Scotland, so David should like that.
Yeah,
yes.
the Romans built it to keep the English out of Scotland. I think that I may have got that history.
I'm Welsh. I'm Welsh.
Yeah, you've got your own walls, right? Good to meet you, Sarah. Thank you. With a name like Morgan, I should have guessed. Well, thanks for the participation. I think there's a couple of anonymous questions, and I think you may have touched on them. So I don't know who they are, so I can't give give credit to the name. But I think you touched on this, Lisa, in what you just said about making it easy, you and Marie-Claude, for companies. But it says, are there any plans to modernize the regulatory environment in Canada? Yes. E.g. the RSSSA, to allow companies to better leverage digital tools. So maybe you did answer that, but maybe there's more to say. So
I can drill down on that one. Yeah, and so the Remote Space Sensing Act legislation, which governs satellite data in Canada, and we do want to make data more easily accessible. I mean, there are many uses for it, including strategic and surveillance and security. But there's also a lot of innovation that can happen. And as we see companies becoming more and more involved, we want to modernize not just that piece of legislation, but all of our legislation dealing with space. So yes, we are looking at it as a priority for us. The government put out a space strategy in 2019, and one of the elements was to look at existing laws, policies, regulations to make sure that the framework is productive for Canadian companies, but also to invite business around the world to come to Canada and partner with Canadian companies. And to stimulate innovation, you need to make sure that scientific knowledge and data is shared and that it's accessible and usable. So yes, we are looking at the huge importance of data. Many people have called data the workhorse of space. It's got so many applications, many of which we can't conceive of yet, but we're seeing hundreds every year develop. So
we are coming up in the hour. We have some more questions left. I know everybody's time is precious, but are you willing, do you have the time to hang on for a little bit longer?
Certainly do. Yeah, this is a great discussion. We really appreciate the engagement.
No, I appreciate all the questions. It saves me having to make them up every 10 seconds. So this is good. So yeah, so I think this has come up in a couple of instances in terms of, I think in part Dawn touches on this, although she's asking about the universities, but I think we could combine them, and that is from Salim. So I've forgotten my manners here, Salim. Let me open the mic to you, and you can ask your question related to this. Oh, this isn't working. My window. Maybe I have to do this. Sorry, for some reason, it's not showing me the participant. Oh, there we go now. All right. Salim, you should be allowed to talk now. The mic's yours. You are muted if you're speaking, Salim.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I used to be the software manager at the Canadian Space Agency for the Canadarm2 robotics and its launch. And now I have a daughter who is in Obs-Gyn and may be interested in women's health, especially for deep space missions, such as mission to Mars and things like that. Can you describe some potential and opportunities in this area of research of medicine?
Well, first of all, Salim, nice to meet you. Thank you for your amazing work. This is just phenomenal. So for health research, there is so many applications that we're looking at that could be beneficial in space and help other countries, but also in Canada. We're looking at bone density, sedentary lifestyle, questions for astronauts who will live off planet for long times, but also relevant for remote communities and an aging demographic. We're looking at cardiovascular and vascular aging. We look at all sorts of impacts on the human body that can happen in space, but also have applications here, as well as medical treatments, ways to treat people remotely and help them be more independent when it comes to preventing any issues from arising, but then also eventual treatment. Marie-Claude, est-ce que tu veux ajouter?
I think you cover everything. Maybe all the activity that we are doing to do the testing within the space station. But I think that you cover all the item.
Thank you so much, Salim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. And so sticking on the kind of health related theme, Ian, I'm looking for you. There you are. This is on viruses. So let me allow Ian to talk, and Ian, that you have the mic now. And I can't criticize you for not unmuting because I did it myself. There you go.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hey, panel, thank you for the time to give your presentations. This was super exciting. And my question is more of, I would say, public health or pandemic related. Do you know if there's any type of doctrine under development or that you guys are using as like a template model for future outbreaks or infectious disease tracking or monitoring in space? Do you have anything in that direction?
Yes, I have heard at some of the conferences that I've been at, people talking about the use of satellite data to both predict health events and look at some of the critical factors that might be common identifiers when you start to see public health outbreaks. So as the pandemic has shown us, the value of sharing science just helps speed up responses around the world. And that includes satellite data to the extent that it can be useful. So yes, there is a doctrine. And if you look it up, I'm sure you could find quite a bit on it, but it's principally, as far as I've seen, around the use of satellite data, as well as artificial intelligence. But if you're looking for the link between space and public health, there's a lot of interesting work being done using satellite data. Marie-Claude, est-ce que tu voudrais ajouter là-dessus?
Maybe just an example. We follow mosquito population with satellites. That's the kind of thing that we're doing.
Yep. And the company that we mentioned, GHGSat, they do really interesting work. And essentially, to your great question, there are probably many other applications out there that are, in development, being conceived of that could help with this. Scientists use this data to make public health decisions.
Awesome.
And I think, sorry, Ian, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, David. With the satellites, is that used to track, I guess, cases like on Earth? Or I meant more of like in the future when we do have like a that middle gateway between the moon and Mars, or even like a establishment on Mars, or even like the 2024 moon base. Are there any parameters for any doctrine with, we'll just say like future pathogens or even microbiological organisms that we could find on other planets?
Okay, I understand. So two parts. The satellite data that I was mentioning for public health applications is here on Earth, but all of the research that we're doing on deep space health and health beyond that I talked about is to sustain humans as they go further and further from Earth for extended periods of time. Not just their nutrition, but the impacts on their bodies of the very harsh environments that we find ourselves in. There's only so much that you can do with equipment. So what else can we do to make sure that humans are safe, that they don't suffer irreversible effects, that they're sustained while they're there, that we can prevent any medical events and keep them safe and healthy during their time in space, but also when they come back. And taking into account the environments in which we're operating is a huge piece of that. What is it like for all of the human systems, the neurological, the vascular, the bone systems? How are oxygen, how is all of that sustained in space, depending on the environment that they're in? So a lot of it involves testing, simulations. As we venture further and further from Earth to different environments, we will have to take those public health measures into consideration. And you raise a good point. People are starting to talk about, with commercialization, the increase in flights that we're seeing. What happens when we have more than 5 people, when we have 10, when we have 20, and they're there for a long time? We want astronauts to be able to go there. We want people to be able to go to Mars, but we want them to come back healthy. David, back to you. And I think we may have to wrap soon. I think we're past time.
Yeah.
Marie-Claude, was there anything else you wanted to add, or Jill?
Yeah, I think if you had another couple of hours, we could fill them easily. But no, and I think that's an important. I think we've covered quite a lot of range of questions about space exploration, and I think you touched on a really important point there, Lisa, which is right now we've been limited to a small number of astronauts, and so you can control the environment, you can control the build up to launch, and all these different things. And I think we had this conversation in a previous lecture, but what happens when you have, members of the public being part of a crew, and if Elon Musk flies 100 people to Mars, and the rapid mutation of microbes in space with space radiation, now you've got a whole population from within which they can grow. So there's a really important consideration. And there was a question in the chat that we never got to about planetary protection, both protecting Mars from us, but also protecting us from whatever we bring back under these circumstances. These are the conversations that keep us interested in what we do. And I think it's everything from the kind of thing that Shifa's doing with the tomato seeds, all the way up to the kind of things that our US, Canadian, and other astronauts are doing actually on the station and beyond. So again, we could go on and on and on, and I usually do, but I will try and resist. And I want to thank you, Lisa, particularly with Marie-Claude and Jill. And Rachel, thank you very much for joining us. It was a great pleasure, a great honor to have you all here. Again, our audience could keep going forever. This will be recorded. It will be available through the RSI YouTube channel. And look out for more RSI and Canadian events in the months to come. We'll start working on our fall program soon. Again, thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to our audience for the great questions. And onward and upward, right, Ad Astra. So thank you all.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
And everyone stay safe and have a safe summer.